What's happening? Welcome to Throwin Stones alongside Ryan Griffin. I'm Matt Basson. Before we get started into everything NBA Finals and Steph and Draymond and Pistons draft that we're all going to be getting into, got to remind you guys to like and subscribe everywhere you find us. That would be Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, full episodes on YouTube, as well as DetroitSportsNation.com. Ryan, when we talked last, Game 1 was just getting underway, and we made our predictions when we come back around here before Game 3, and we were right this time. There hasn't been a Game 3 yet, so we were at least correct on the timeline. You went 2-0, thinking Warriors are going to do the thing. I was with you, but just to be different, I said let's go 1-1. Thinking the Warriors would take care of business in the first game. I thought the Celtics would be tired from 2 7-game series and all that, and not getting as much rest as Golden State had gotten. And we looked like we were dead on the money by the time the third quarter ended. It was 92-80. The Warriors were up a dozen. Everything was looking roses for Golden State. And then Boston outscored them 40-16, made 9 of their 12 three-pointers in the fourth quarter, and had one hell of a stunning comeback. And then Game 2 rolls around, and we got a dogfight by halftime. It's a 2-point lead for the Warriors. And then the Warriors go on a run in the third like they did in Game 1, an even better one this time of 35-14. And this time, they didn't take their foot off the gas. And with 10 minutes to go in the game, Ime Udoka pulled the starters, threw in the reserves, threw the white towel, and we are going back to Boston, tied at 1.
Best case scenario for the Celtics, really. They were able to get one of the ones that they wanted in San Francisco, and now they're going back to Boston with home court advantage, except they've been worse in Boston than they have in any of the other cities, arenas that they played in this playoffs. So maybe it's not so good for them. And the Warriors could easily be up 2-0 in this series. I honestly think the Celtics could probably say the same thing. The third quarter got away from them in Game 2, just like the fourth quarter got away from the Warriors in Game 1. So I don't know that we know too much about this series, really. I thought there were some drastic overreactions after Game 1. It seemed people thought that, like, Jason Tatum's poor shooting, was he 3 of 17 or something, that it was offset by the fact that Boston made 50% of their threes on 40 attempts, and that's just not how it goes. You'd rather Jason Tatum score 35 points than have Marcus Smart, Al Horford, Derek White, and Peyton Pritchard go 17 of 26 or whatever they went from the three-point line. Like, you'd much rather let Jason Tatum just get his than have all those other guys be raining down threes on your head. And then in Game 2, I thought it was weird because the Warriors, they didn't play particularly well in the first half, at least, I thought, and then they came out guns blazing in the third with Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, who didn't even play the fourth, but they played Klay Thompson. Draymond Green played well, but Klay didn't shoot great. I think Looney shot well, but he only shot the ball 6 times. I think he was 6 for 6, and it was just, it's weird where you look at a game like that and you look at some of these big quarters. And for the Celtics, their big quarter was a little bit more where you could look at something and they just hit a bunch of threes. I think they were 8 for their first 8, or maybe 8 of their first 9 or something in that fourth quarter from beyond the arc. And then for the Warriors, you still looked at the final stats and it didn't seem people really just went off in the way that I guess you'd expect. Like, Steph scored 29 and 21 shots because he was 5 of 12 from 3, but that's Steph Curry. That's what you expect. And then you look at everyone else, Poole, I think he had 14 shots and scored 17 points on those. So not terrible by any means, but you didn't have somebody score like 30 points who you thought probably wasn't going to do that like you did with Al Horford in, Game 1 for the Celtics.
Yeah, completely different games all around. You and I obviously dealt with a lot of people that thought this series is over. The Celtics, if they could do this with Tatum not scoring at all and Tatum dishing out 13 assists, then this series is a wrap. It's nice to think that way, but then you're also assuming that Al Horford is going to continue to get you 26 points on 9 for 12 shooting, that Smart's going to continue to be, prolific from deep, 4 for 7, 7 for 11 overall for 18. Derek White, 21 points on 6 for 11, 5 for 8 from deep. And then Brown obviously did his thing, 24 points on 10 for 13. Now, Brown, you're expecting it from, but Marcus Smart, never been that great offensively. Al Horford, never been that great offensively. Derek White, we still don't know what he could be. He's still pretty young in this league and has been a backup point guard the entire time he's been in the NBA for the most part. So, exactly as you said, nothing that you would think is sustainable. There's a reason they're role players and not superstars put these numbers up consistently. Role players do them once in a while. And then to fall back well below the median in game 2 in this one, where Brown had 17 on 17 shots. Thank you, Draymond defense. You look at a group of guys that went 15 of 23 from deep in game 1 for Horford, Smart, and White. They combined for 16 points in game 2 on just 6 for 23 shooting. Now, they're not that bad, but they're not as good as they were in game 1 either. So you can't assume that either one of these things that you've seen in these first 2 games are what's going to be lasting throughout this series. The Warriors made the necessary adjustments they needed in game 2. They gave a much better effort on defense. Overall, across the board, every single player played much better across the board defensively than they did in game 1. I think got caught with their pants down in game 1. They thought they had this game in the bag. You're up a dozen going into the 4th. We're at home. The crowd's rocking and rolling. We're going to continue to be rocking and rolling. Steph had 21 points in the first quarter, followed it up with a big fat 0 in the second, which is just ridiculous. And I'm almost positive if we look at the all-time NBA record for points in a quarter, Isaiah Thomas with 25 in the third on a messed up ankle. Even on that messed up ankle, I'll bet you he didn't have 0 points in the fourth quarter, Ryan. So just it's a weird game in general in game 1 where everything looked like it was going Golden State's way, and then the fourth quarter happened and it completely turned around. And in game 2, didn't know what to make of it by halftime. Got 2 teams battling. Neither one's really out-dueling the other. And then the third quarter happens, and Boston didn't come out of the locker room at halftime, basically. So 2 very weird games and a very weird series. We've already talked about how we really don't know what to expect or how to pick this series. These 2 games, Ryan, didn't help me at all.
No, me neither. And like I said, I'm just glad that we can get over the overreaction of game 1, where now it was Celtics in 5, and the Warriors don't have any answers for them, and the Celtics are like all the answers for the Warriors. And it's like bizarre stuff from really a one-quarter flip, because the Warriors scored, again, 32 in the first quarter in game 1, and then they scored 38 in the third quarter in game 1. So it's not like they weren't able to put up points in bunches. They scored 16 in the fourth, obviously, which did them in and gave up 40 points. But I don't know either. And we talked about this series before the series, obviously, that it was unpredictable and that it was really hard to call. And I think that still holds true. And I don't have confidence that Boston is going to win both these games at home, but I'm certainly not going to pick them to lose both these games at home. So, my guess would be going into Game 5, we're still going to be 2-2 with not a whole ton of answers.
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing we got out of this is that we got health going on. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's playing, except for Robert Williams, unfortunately. Robert Williams, you can just tell that knee, that leg is just bothering him, and he is not with his defensive self, and that sucks for Boston. But getting to see Gary Payton back out there, and the man didn't miss a shot in Game 2. Didn't take that many, but doesn't matter. He didn't miss any of the ones that he did take in his first game back from having a left elbow that went the way it's not supposed to go. So that's great to see that for the most part, health is absolutely fine, and I hope Robert Williams is able to get these next couple days, or a day, I guess we're at this point. Game 3 is tomorrow, Wednesday. So hopefully he's had some time to get a little bit of rehab on it, and hopefully he's able to go for Game 3. So let's look at Game 3. The Boston Celtics have not lost back-to-back games in these playoffs. They are 6-0 after losing a game in the playoffs. In fact, they haven't lost back-to-back games since January, when in Toronto on the second end of a back-to-back night, half the team didn't play. That's the last time they have lost 2 games in a row. So it's been quite a while for Boston, doing it very well, obviously, in the playoffs against good teams, with Milwaukee and with Miami. So you got a team that has proven that when they lose, they bounce back pretty well. So what are you expecting for Game 3? Are they keeping that record perfect, or is Golden State finding a way to somehow just steal home court advantage right off the bat again?
I think I'm going to end up picking Golden State to win Game 3 and then the Celtics to tie it up in Game 4. And probably just because they've been here more than the Celtics have. And I think from some of the stuff that we've seen Golden State do, it's a little more like duplicable in the following games and quarters and everything else than some of the stuff that we've seen the Celtics do. You have Draymond, who's obviously a great defender, and then Wiggins. I think they've been able to make life pretty tough for Tatum and Brown. And then for the other side of the ball for the Warriors, in one game, and I guess I'm picking it to be Game 3 because I'm expecting that they're going to win. I expect Klay Thompson to shoot better. In the last game, even when the Warriors were up 28 or 29, whenever it was, he was still in that fourth quarter lineup, just trying to get some extra burn and some extra reps in. And I know his final stats weren't great. I think he shot like 5 of 17. But there was a period there in, I think, the third quarter where Klay had a really nice like 5 or 6 minute stretch, and he probably made 3 of those 5 or 4 of those 5 shots that he made, probably throwing a couple free throws in there as well. So you've seen it in like little pockets, even though Game 1 and 2 overall for him haven't been very impressive. And I just expect the Warriors to figure that out at some point. Where I think the Celtics could take Game 3 is I need Jason Tatum to be a little bit more aggressive on taking some drives, because there are even some spots in Game 2 where I saw like Gary Payton II on him or Steph Curry on him, and I'm thinking like, okay, there's Tatum's just going to back him in or whatever, and then he just turns around face ups and then he shoots over him. And I think even Mark Jackson or whoever was on the call was like, oh, that's a good shot. He's right over him. Like, no, it's not. Just because you might have been unbothered by the defense and that you can just rise up and shoot over him, like he didn't try any moves to get closer to the basket. He just turned, faced up, and shot. And if you're Golden State, that's a win. If I got Steph Curry guarding Jason Tatum and he's still taking a 14-footer, that's what I want. I don't want him trying to drive to the lane and either get a foul called on Curry or just use his strength to get to the basket. So I think we'll need to see a little bit more of that from Jason Tatum. I suspect we probably will. And I think Draymond Green will probably get booed. Nobody else that we've seen since Kobe in Boston. Or maybe LeBron, but I really don't think those Celtics fans are messing with Draymond Green at all right now. And he's probably public enemy number 1 in that building. But that's the type of energy that Draymond thrives off of, and that I think he can get part of his team to adopt. I think the Warriors are a little bit mentally tougher than the Celtics. You saw, I'm sure you've seen the clip by now of Grant Williams like pushing Andrew Wiggins, and then Wiggins throws him an elbow, and then Grant Williams looks right at the ref, and he's like complaining for the call. And I think that sort of mentality is just where the Warriors have the Celtics beat. Draymond especially, you've heard it not just here right now, but if you listen to any other basketball talk, really, or even just been on the internet, you've seen people talk about how Draymond like mentally controlled Game 2. His stats were good. Again, 9 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists on 3 shots. So he's plenty fine there. But just like his emotion and his attitude and his energy, like he was big man on campus in Game 2. And I don't know that's going to change a whole lot for Game 3. And I think that's probably why I'm giving the edge to the Warriors here, because I think they just have a little bit of a mental edge on the Celtics right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see also how the refs deal with Draymond in Boston. If Draymond gets a little hot-headed and the refs are quick on a whistle, it can drastically affect the games. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays to fruition, because Draymond defensively, when he's locked in, one of the smarter defenders we maybe ever seen in this game. To be able to play all the different positions he's able to defensively is a sight to see, and doesn't get the credit it absolutely deserves. Just saying that as a basketball person, if all you're doing is stat watching, you're never going to get the worth of a Draymond Green. It's just not going to happen. Tatum, Game 3, coming off a loss. You're talking about you wanted to be more aggressive. He has shown to be that so far in these playoffs. He's averaging about 32 points a game and shooting 50% from the floor, coming directly off of a loss, as opposed to about 24 points per game and a much worse shooting percentage during the loss. So expect to see him being more aggressive, probably taking more to the basket, and not so much just shooting over the top. I know he believes in his shooting, and he's got inches on Steph Curry, especially when Steph's guarding him. But sometimes it helps to force the action, and he's got to be that aggressive. The Celtics, they need to work on the turnovers, because those are the biggest differences between them winning and them losing. When they are under 15 turnovers, they are almost unstoppable. They are, 13-2 in those games, and they are 0 for 5 when they have 16 or more turnovers in the playoffs. So if they can cut down on the turnovers, it makes a giant difference in how they play the basketball game. The problem is they don't have a ball handler, really, and we've talked about this already, but having a lack of a ball handler definitely affects you with a team that can swarm and shift defensively like the Warriors can and make life difficult, and they got quick players to get their hands in places. It does make it difficult for the Boston Celtics to have to do what they want to do. And like I said it after Game 1, Golden State had to take a page out of Miami's book with the way that they defend them and get their hands in lanes, because the Celtics don't make the crisps of passes. And they did exactly that, and they turned all those turnovers into 30-plus points and absolutely helped them rout in Game 2.
Yeah, the Celtics, of course, can't have that many turnovers again, or it is going to be a 5-game series if they just turn the ball over this much. And like you said, the Warriors were really great on not just getting the turnovers, but on capitalizing on them as well. And part of it was Celtics sloppiness. I think part of it, too, is just the way the Warriors play defense. Everybody seemed like they were really active. Steph Curry's been really good defensively these entire playoffs, and Draymond was flying around everywhere. Wiggins is flying around everywhere. And I just think for the Warriors, it's something that they're, of course, able to create. But the Celtics, even though they're a high turnover team in general, what we saw in Game 2 was even over, like, beyond the pale for them. And I would expect them to come down a little bit in this game as well. Being at home, they're probably more comfortable on the court. The role players should play better, like we talked about all playoffs. And with just guess what the Celtics are trying to do, I expect them to come out sharper in Game 3, and I expect Game 3 to be the closest of either of these two games. Not that, well, Game 2 wasn't really close, but Game 1 was pretty close, honestly, for the most part, even when the Warriors were up 12. It didn't feel like the game was over, and in the first 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, the Celtics were able to cut it to 3, and then it was just seesaw back and forth until the Celtics were able to really bomb the game wide open. Last game, not so much. So I'd expect Game 3 to be the closest, like, from start to finish, all the way through. And I think it makes for an exciting game. And while I think the Celtics will still have more turnovers than they would like, you would hope that it's not the same kind of problem as it was in Game 2. And I think it's a great point that you made about Tatum, where he is super aggressive after these losses in the playoffs and coming home. I think that's a perfect recipe for him to have one of those like superstar type games that we've seen him had in the playoffs. And if there's any time for him to have it, it's definitely right now.
Oh, absolutely. And if they are going to have a better Game 3, the Celtics have got to figure out how to play the third quarter, because it has been awful to them so far in these NBA Finals. They've been outscored in the 2 games in the third, 73-38. They had that game against Miami also, where they were outscored by 25 in the third. That was Game 1, where basically Miami did to Boston what Boston did to Golden State in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. So they have been very bad in the third, and the Warriors have been very good in the third. So somehow the Celtics have to find a way to bring the intensity and the shot-making ability in the third quarter to advance this series. Look, we saw them pull out Game 1 without it, but I think that was an anomaly more than it is a regularity. So you got to bet that if they're going to continue to get bombed out in the third quarter, it's not going to go well for the Celtics in the long run, and the Golden State Warriors are going to be your NBA champions in 5 or 6 games. So they have to figure out how to come out of the half ready to play, because the Warriors are proving they are. And so you've got to find a way to match that. Now, they are going back home. The Garden's going to be rocking. It's the first NBA Finals there since they lost in 7 to the Lakers in 2010. The Garden's going to be ready to go. But the Garden's been ready to go for the Eastern Conference Finals. They were ready to go for the semifinals. And yet, for whatever reason, the Celtics are still just 5-4 at home. You are 1 game over 500 in the playoffs at home. You've been so good on the road. That's the whole reason you are here. But you have got to find a way to bring that intensity when you are in front of your own crowd. Like you said, expect the role players to step up. I don't know how they can step up any more than what they did in game one in that fourth quarter, but they're going to have to play well. They're going to have to shoot well and not turn the ball over to find a way to take a 2-1 lead and hold home court for one more game. It doesn't sound like you're expecting it for game three. I think I'm with you. I think it's so hard to pick. But I think we're going to get a better Klay Thompson, and I think Draymond is going to be able to keep his composure enough to stay in the game. We've seen from Steph what he's able to do. I think that's going to be enough to defensively get in front of the guys that need to be stayed in front of. Let Tatum and Brown get theirs. Tatum might have a big game of 40 points, and I think it's going to be a great game. But I think I'm with you. Golden State, I think, takes game three ever so slightly. 2, 3, 4 points, something like that.
Yeah, like to me, the Celtics are a little weird because it still feels. I know they're in the finals. It still feels like a team that's maybe not ready yet. But like they're here, and they won game one with one of the more impressive finals fourth quarters we've ever seen. But it just still feels like there's something that's off with them. Maybe it's just in contrast to Golden State because we've seen them here so many times. But I don't know. I'm just even if the Celtics win, I said they may be a good team.
All right, let's move on. We're getting closer and closer to the NBA draft, and we are still trying to figure out what our Pistons are going to do with the 5th pick. But there are also some names lingering out there, some big names, actually. One of the biggest names is one of the biggest players in the NBA. Deandre Ayton doesn't look like anything is getting done with the Phoenix Suns. And lo and behold, our Detroit Pistons, Ryan, are popping up as a name of a team that sounds like they're going to go hard for his services.
I hope so, and I fully expect the Pistons to pursue DeAndre Ayton if the Suns don't give him an offer, which it doesn't necessarily sound like is going to happen. And I'm all for it. I'm a huge fan of DeAndre Ayton. I don't think his stock has ever been lower than it has right now because people are really mad about the Suns still losing to the Mavs in the semifinals there. But I think Ayton's a really good player. He's still super young. I think he's only 22 years old. And if we can pair him with Cade Cunningham and then with Shaedon Sharpe or Keegan Murray, whoever we pick number 5, and then Saddiq Bey as well, I think you have a really strong young core there. And to me, he fills everything that I want, next to Cade. He's somebody who can rim run. He can be that pick and roll partner with Cade Cunningham. And he's pretty good defensively too. So I am all for DeAndre Ayton. I know there are people who are not because of this year. And, last year in the Western Conference Finals when the Suns made the finals, Ayton averaged, I think, like 18 points, 13 boards, and I want to say 2 or 3 blocks in that series and was just really an instrumental part in getting that Suns teams to the finals when he was only, again, 21 or 22 years old. So big DeAndre Ayton fan. I want it more than anything else. It's my number one hope for the Pistons this offseason is that they can somehow sign DeAndre Ayton. A sign and trade is a little bit less exciting because then you're giving up some of the pieces that I still like, but I'll do whatever it takes really to get Ayton on this team.
It's so funny to me, the people that are against this move. This is how far we've gotten in how basketball has changed. This is one of the premier centers in the game, offensively and defensively. He is a traditional center. Yeah, he can shoot a 3 once in a while for you, but he's a traditional center for the most part. And every team in the NBA should be clamoring for this guy's services. And we got fans saying, no, don't bring that. We don't want that here. I think you guys are out of your mind. I'm obviously biased. He went to University of Arizona. I went to University of Arizona. I enjoyed his 1 year there. Bought and paid for by Sean Miller, most likely. No, I'm just kidding. I would absolutely love this. I think we're dreaming if it's just a sign, because then Phoenix is getting nothing for this, and I don't know how they just let him go for nothing. So I'm thinking a sign and trade is probably what's going to end up happening if we are the team that ends up, picking up his 5th-year option, and then that's what allows the sign and trade to happen, and then we get his services for this team. But pairing DeAndre Ayton up, and they're talking about a guy that has the absolute ability to give you 20 points, to pull down 12 to 15 rebounds, get a few blocks as well. I don't know why you wouldn't want that. But, Ryan, let me ask you a question from a Pistons point of view. For those that don't know, why is this not just the second coming of Andre Drummond?
Okay, that's definitely not fair. I think Ayton can do way more. Andre Drummond can do, and I think he's already, proven it. I think he probably has a better attitude than Drummond does, and I know he's probably going to get a ton of crap for not wanting to play with the Suns or being mad that the Suns didn't give him a contract or whatever. But he made one comment about it at the beginning of the year, and then he played the entire year without a contract, and then people were mad that he didn't want to go back into a game. They were losing by 30 points when he game 7, mind you, so there's not another game after it, a game where the Suns were again losing by, I don't know if it was 28, 30, whatever it was, right? The Suns were down by about 30 points. Deandre Ayton says, no, I don't want to go back in the game. He's got potentially $100+ million on the line this offseason. No, you don't want to go in the game because you're not going to win, and there's not going to be like a next game either. So you're losing, your season's over, you're going to lose. It doesn't make sense to risk literally like your entire future and your entire family's future to go back in, and really the only thing that can happen is you get hurt, and then maybe Twitter's a little bit nicer to you than they are now that you said, I don't want to go back into that game. But I think Ayton has a much higher ceiling than what Andre Drummond did. He is a better free throw shooter than Drummond and has got more range, what Drummond had too. Ayton's a guy who, for his career, shooting 75% from the line. And if Drummond shot 75% from the line, I think all Pistons fans would probably have a bit of a different viewpoint of him. Drummond's a better rebounder. I think Ayton is a better defender in this point in his career than Drummond was just 3 years in, or whatever, 3-4 years in, than what Drummond was. Although Drummond towards the end of his time with the Pistons was actually a pretty good defender. But if you can get that with Ayton, you can get it now. And again, the problem wasn't just Drummond himself specifically. That's not a guy that you're ever going to win with as your best player, but you're not asking Deandre Ayton to come in and be your best player. You're asking him to come in and be your number 2 behind Cade Cunningham, and if by miracle happens, you're number 3 behind Sadiq or whoever you pick at number 5. I think Ayton's better than Sadiq is. I don't necessarily think that's an argument, but who knows? Sadiq could grow, probably not, but you're asking Ayton to have a completely different role than what you asked of Drummond when he was here, and you're running Drummond out here with Reggie Jackson or Josh Smith and Greg Monroe. Like, it's just, or even Blake Griffin for a short time there. And it's just totally different than what Drummond was asked to do the majority of his career here in Detroit, where you're asking him to lead you as even a more traditional big than what Deandre Ayton is, and you're asking Ayton to do something completely different.
So we're talking about a center here who's about to be 23 years old. So the beginning of his prime in the NBA, really. And he saw what he was getting or not getting in Phoenix. And he wants a bigger role in the offense. He wants to be the guy. And so coming here to Detroit, Cade Cunningham's kind of already the guy. But you can very much be the 1-2 punch that's not going to be forgotten about like he kind of was in Phoenix over the year, where it was the outside stuff all the time. It wasn't so much DeAndre Ayton and a back and forth between him and Booker or him and CP3. So if you can get that in Detroit, Ayton's going to have to be your number 2 at that point, and maybe even arguing as far as stats-wise maybe for your number 1. But Cade's going to be the ball handler and the one who controls it, so you would think he's still going to be the man. But I wouldn't put him at 3rd. I don't think DeAndre Ayton wants to come to a team where he's not at the very least the second, guy on the team.
Yeah, I think he'll be. Oh, Sadiq might still take more shots than him. Actually, Sadiq's not shy about putting the ball up. One of the ways that the Pistons are going to show DeAndre Ayton that they appreciate him more than the Suns ever did is just by paying him a bunch of money, right? Not that the roles might necessarily be so different than what he had with Phoenix, but DeAndre Ayton, again, just another difference between him and Drummond is Ayton's a guy who's already experienced winning and been on winning teams, where when Drummond came into the Pistons, he was on losers his entire career, and then the most success he ever experienced was as an 8th seed, at least in Detroit. And then I know he went on to play for the Lakers and the Sixers and some other teams who were supposed to be contenders. But I think with Ayton, even if his role in the offense isn't so much different than what it is in Phoenix, I don't expect the Pistons to be all that eager about running post-ups for DeAndre Ayton, or just, hey, take 10 back to the basket shots a game or something like that. I think they'll just show him they appreciate him by paying him like they do. I don't think Ayton's beef with Phoenix was ever necessarily, hey, I'm not getting the ball so much, or Devin Booker is shooting more than me. I think it was more, at least pay me. I know I was an instrumental part to your finals run, and you guys didn't pay me like it. So I think just by getting the bag from the Pistons, he'll feel way more appreciated here, and maybe even more at home here. I know he went to Arizona and then got drafted by Phoenix, but I don't know where he's from originally. I don't know that he's from Arizona originally. So if he only spent those, that one season. All right, cool. So he spent that one season in Arizona, not necessarily like Arizona is home. And if the Pistons can get him for 4 or 5 years, just make Detroit his home, let him grow with Cade Cunningham. And I expect he'll be yelled at less than he was when he was playing with Chris Paul. So that's a bonus too.
And also, fun fact, if the Pistons are able to get Deandre Ayton, they would now have the number 1 and number 2 pick from the 2018 NBA draft, because we already got Marvin Bagley from that trade with Sacramento, and so now we would add Deandre Ayton to it, and I would love to see that personally, because I think
I would love to get the number 3 pick from that draft as well, and just get them all, bring them all together.
Could be a possibility.
Number 3, 4, and 5, actually, 1 through 5. Why not?
All right, well, Ryan, are the Pistons keeping their 5? Are they trading their 5? Are they adding to their 5? At somewhere in the first round of this NBA draft that's upcoming.
Do you mean the 5th pick or their starting lineup 5?
No. The 5th pick.
Oh, so I asked you 2 questions. I definitely don't think they're trading number 5. Again, we talked about it a little bit before on maybe 2 or 3 shows ago. Unless Paolo Banchero or something falls to number 4, and then the Kings are like, hey, we'll give you Jerami Grant in 5, or Jerami Grant for 4, and Jerami Grant in 5 for 4. And then, no, I don't think they're trading 5 unless that scenario plays out. And I think they'll be, I would expect them to try to add to it and try and get another pick, whether it's another lottery pick or whether it's a pick maybe even later in the first round, depending on what happens with Jerami Grant. But one thing I would say with almost like full certainty is that they're staying pat at 5 and trying to grab whoever they think is the best player there, whether it's Ivy, Sharp, Mathurin, or Keegan Murray, AJ Griffin, even maybe. I don't know. Whoever they feel like is the best player there is. So I think one of those guys will definitely end up being a Piston. And then I think they're more likely to add another first-round pick than they are to trade 5 away.
Okay, so let's talk about that adding a first-round pick, because there's a few options that have been thrown out there as rumors of possibilities of what the Pistons can do or what they can get back for Jerami Grant, who it looks like his time in Detroit is pretty much over. So the one we've heard of for a while, the Portland Trailblazers. Trade him to Portland, you get the 7th pick, you now have the 5th and the 7th pick. But there's other teams out there that are talking about making moves that the Pistons absolutely could take advantage of. The one I talked about with you that I like the most is the Atlanta Hawks getting involved, and we get Bogdan Bogdanovic for 2 years and $36 million left on his contract. We get the number 16 pick as well, so we get a proven scorer and another pick that's just outside the lottery.
Yeah, I like that. I think adding shooting to the Pistons is one of their top priorities in the offseason, and Bogdanovic is definitely a guy who fits that bill. And we've seen guys taken obviously around the 16th pick before who have gone on to become some major contributors. And I think there's even a couple guys in this draft who, of course, when you get down to 16, there's nobody that you look at and say, oh, that dude is certainly a superstar. But there's some really interesting players around that 16 range that if they popped, right, if they hit their absolute ceiling, could be some really good NBA players, or they could be out the league in 3 years. But just another swing at it, another bite at the apple, and then to add a proven shooter is something I'm all about. Now, I wish he only had 1 more year on his contract. I'd like to keep the books a little more clean, but it is what it is. And overall, I think I'd just rather have Bogdanovic and that pick, and shipping out Jerami Grant is something that I'd be willing to do.
Okay, so there were a couple others out there that were going on. The Timberwolves were one they were talking about, where we'd receive Malik Beasley, Jared, and their 19th pick in the upcoming draft, and maybe even the 40th pick as well. So all of that just for Jerami Grant. And then the last one was a Utah one where we get Dylan Brooks, who has 1 year and $11 million left on his contract, DeAnthony Melton, as well as the 22nd pick. Do either one of those look appealing?
I like the Dylan Brooks one. That'd be Memphis, though, instead of Utah.
Oh, what did I? Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. Sorry. The pick is via Utah. I knew the names didn't match up right.
No, so I like that. I think Dylan Brooks is a good player, and I think Melton would be a good backup guard, too. I actually don't think I would do the Minnesota one. One thing that I did, and I guess I didn't realize until we were looking at these players, was Beasley shot 38.5% on 7 threes a game, which is definitely better than I imagined him being as a shooter. So I might pull the trigger on it, but he also comes with some weird off-the-court stuff. Not like anything criminal, really. He's just got some weird social media stuff that you could probably just do without, and then pick 22 or whatever. Doesn't really do much for me, and at that point I think I'd rather just hold on to Jerami Grant until either the trade deadline or just keep him and then let the $20 million he's owed come off the books at the end of the year, and then you can play with some of your new found cap space. But if I were the Pistons, I don't think I would do the Minnesota one, because I think there's probably a little bit more value to be had at the trade deadline. And if you're trading Grant at the trade deadline, you're probably getting a pick that's near 22 back anyway.
Okay, so between the top two that we had talked about, the Atlanta Hawks, and we're getting their Malik Beasley. I'm missing my own notes here. The Atlanta Hawks, we're getting Bogdan Bogdanovic, as well as the number 16 pick, or with the Portland Trail Blazers, and it's just the 7th pick. So would you rather have 5 and 7 or 5, 16, and Bogdanovic?
I'd rather have 5 and 7. I like Bogdanovic, but I wouldn't see him as part of the Pistons' future. Whereas if you have 5 and 7, at least there's hope that one of those guys are going to end up being a really productive player for the Pistons and be part of their core. And then maybe they can get 2 of the guys that we talked about: Sharp, Ivy, Mathurin, AJ Griffin, and Murray. You'd have to be able to pair 2 of those guys at least.
Okay, so if we do end up with 5 and 7, who you want the Pistons picking up at 5 and 7 out of those 4 names that you just dropped?
I would like Ivy and Sharp the most, but I don't think that's going to happen. It seems very unrealistic that those guys are both there when we would pick, or one that either of them would be there at 7. Again, I think same thing about Murray. So I still like Sharp at 5, and I don't see Murray getting to 7. But if he was there, I would take him over.
Okay.
So either Sharp and Murray or Sharp and Mathurin, because I don't expect Jaden Ivey to be there.
See, I know I should want Mathurin. Went to Arizona as well, and I appreciate what he did at Arizona. And they're kids, so there's time to grow and all that. I just saw too much of not getting his offense enough on his own, and now you're going to the NBA where he's got to find a way to do that against bigger, stronger, faster. And I think we end up with another Stanley Johnson situation where he's decent defensively, but offensively he's just not doing enough to stick around here and help us get to where we want to get to in the end. So I'm with you. Give me Sharp and probably Murray. I still don't want Ivy. We've been over this. I don't want an undersized 2 guard. Got no use for that. Okay, over under.
Sweet.
Game 3, 70 points for Steph and Jason Tatum. You going over or under?
Under. Because I think even if they both hit like 33, that's still under. And it's a pretty good game for both of them.
All right. Just for fun, I'm going to go with the over for a higher scoring game for both of them, and hopefully we get a great Game 3. By the time we talk to you again on Thursday, Game 3 will be in the books, and we are both saying the Golden State Warriors will be up 2-1, but as we've already proven by talking about this series, what do we know?
That's right.
Nothing. So
whole lot of nothing.
Whole lot of nothing, just like everybody else out there. So enjoy Game 3, and we will talk to you guys afterwards. He's Ryan Griffin. I'm Matt Basson. Thank you for hanging out with us on Throwin' Stones. We'll see you guys again real soon.
Yep.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a what?